Hello, everyone. My name is Valerie Smith. I am 55 years old. I just turned 55 in March, and I have used metabolic therapies the last 8 years to maintain being in remission of 6 mental illnesses that I suffered from for 4 decades. I don't have any memories of ever being well. My earliest memories are of being 5. And even then, I was overcome with sadness and anxiety. And by the time I was 8 years old, I began hearing very dark voices that instructed me to harm others, to harm my family, and to harm myself, later to be diagnosed as schizophrenia, along with anxiety and depression. The schizophrenia was so unlivable that by the time I entered into my teen years, I had turned the self-hatred of the voices away from harming others, and I turned it on myself. And that is where my extreme anorexia started as a teenager. And for almost 4 decades, I teetered right around 70, 75 pounds at 5'9". I was also diagnosed with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and I had the regular symptoms of that as a teenager, as an early 20-year-old, of body checking, checking locks, counting things before I could relax. But the self-hatred and the voices of the schizophrenia were so dark and so evil and incessant, 24 hours a day, that the OCD morphed into something more harmful than what it already was. And I was self-harming by cutting my arms and legs as a release of this stress of the voices screaming at me. And I also developed a mind-boggling condition called trichotillomania, where I was pulling out all of my scalp hair, my eyebrows, and my eyelashes. Again, in an attempt to deal with all of these mental illness symptoms that I didn't understand. I knew there was something wrong in my brain. I felt like my brain was broken. And that's when I found Dr. Georgia Ede and Dr. Chris Palma online. This was way before they had written their books, but what's in their books is what I found. They had some early talks on smart TVs and YouTube, and I found some of their writings online. I decided that I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to try one last time. And it started with one bite of animal protein. And I promised myself that if it got easier in a week, I would double it. And then I would double it again. And then I would double it again. It took me 2 to 3 months to even get up to what would be considered a normal portion that someone eats in a regular standard American diet. It took me several months just to get up to eating 8 ounces of animal protein, of beef. So it was a long process, but I began to notice changes. And at the 3-month mark, the 6-month mark, the 9-month mark, things were changing. And they were concrete changes. For the first time in my life, the depression and the anxiety lowered. And also, for the first time since I was 8 years old, the schizophrenic voices that would pull me to the brink of harming others, harming myself, following through with both of those, pulling me into a world where I would lose touch with reality for days, and my family could not get me back to where I needed to be in order to function with them. It lowered. For the first time since I was 8 years old, it was still there, but it was now, I describe it as now in another room with the door closed. It had quieted for the first time in my entire life. By the time I made it to the 12-month mark, the 1-year mark, everything was completely gone. I was absolutely blown away by how powerful the intervention of nutrition is to follow and make the remission of mental illness. It was just absolutely unbelievable to me. I'm not under the care of any kind of a care team, and I don't feel that I need it. I have no issues that I'm dealing with right now. I did go to some functional medicine doctors and some naturopaths to get some individual testing done. I found out that I had heavy metals, and I went through chelation therapy. I had some testing done to finally diagnose that I had very, very bad inflammatory bowel disease, and I had gut permeability, so I needed to work on healing my endothelial gut lining so that, so that I could properly absorb my nutrition and my supplements. And I had mineral and iodine deficiencies that showed up when I had the heavy metals testing. So I used functional medicine and some of these integrative therapies to put my body in the best position, knowing that I had detoxed some of the things that were harming me and that were harming my brain, harming my tissues. So all of those complementary therapies were helpful prior to me finding ketogenic therapy. In terms of therapeutics, traditional treatment physicians, they failed me for 40 years. And at the end of my time with them, I asked them to taper me off of the last cocktail of 4 meds that I was on, and they refused to do that. So if you've got a wonderful care team around you, it's always going to be advisable and always going to be better to work with someone. But in my case, I did not have that. So I did as much background work as I possibly could and researched the individual medications that I was on. I found some online tapering schedules that helped me formulate a plan. And I did it a very, very long. It took me 3 years to get off of those last 4 meds that I was on. And this was prior to me starting ketogenic therapy. This was 3 years prior to me even starting. When I embarked on this, there were no glucose monitors that you could buy over the counter. There certainly was no talk of ketone monitors. I didn't know anything about any of those monitors, testing of ketones, levels of ketones. I did this on my own, and I would check in with myself of basically how I felt. I could tell when I was in ketosis by fasting and by exercising, and how my symptoms were relating. So what I did do, though, I went and got a full panel of an 84-point blood panel at the start of when I was starting this, so that I would know where I stood in blood work in terms of overt deficiencies, what needed to be addressed, and it gave me a baseline of how I felt based on my physical symptoms and the biomarkers that the blood work provided. And then after my healing, at the 12 to 18 month mark, I went and got that same blood work done again in order to compare the two, to make sure that what I felt physically and mentally was also being translated on paper, that those deficiencies and overt, illnesses were showing signs of improvement or complete, remission. Because I had hypothyroid, I had osteoporosis, I had many, many illnesses in the anemia realm, iron deficient anemia, B12 anemia, had all of those going on, and all of those biomarkers were either improving or I was now on the optimal level. And I have since done some more blood work another year after that, just to check in with myself and make sure. But I haven't had anything done in 6 years. I am a very much supporter of using key supplements depending on what illnesses you're dealing with. I advocate for, like we said before, getting the most that we possibly can out of nutrient-dense nutrition. But I had so many deficiencies going on that I needed all the help I could get. It was going to be a long time before I could heal my magnesium deficiency. It was going to take a long time with food to heal my neurotransmitters and the 5-HTP, the GABA that I needed, the carnitine, the creatine. So I used key supplements all along the way at the beginning, knowing that at some point, being completely healed, that I would be able to play around with those and reduce them and possibly come off of them. So I used magnesium threonate, which is the only magnesium that crosses the blood-brain barrier to heal cognitive dysfunction. And magnesium is also a chelator of mercury and heavy metals. So magnesium is super important. So that is one that I used. I used GABA, 5-HTP. I used Lugol's 2% iodine drops to work on my thyroid, to displace fluoride in your system, which is a terrible neurotoxin. I used methylated B12 to heal B12 deficiency, and L-theanine and tyrosine, carnitine, and some choline and glycine. Now, where I am today, I have been able to slowly eliminate all of those, and the 20 or 30 supplements that I was taking, I now only take 2. I take magnesium, which will be lifelong. Everybody needs magnesium. Everybody's magnesium deficient. And I get this concentrated vitamins that I feel like I benefit from that healed my gut permeability by using grass-fed beef organ supplements. So all of those supplements that I used initially, I've healed those deficiencies, and I now don't need them anymore, and I'm down to just those 2. Nutrition is just such an amazing component and tool that we can use. And it can ebb and flow, of course, over the course of your healing and in ketogenic therapy. So what I did on the first year to gain the most healing and gain remission of all of my mental illness symptoms, I used what they call the lion diet, which is beef, salt, and water only. I did that for 12 months, and I ate a lot of ground beef and a lot of cuts of meat that I would slow cook in the slow cooker in order to get the heavy fat profile from beef, like chuck roasts and all those different roasts that have the collagen and connective tissue that are super healing to our brain function. Today, the year 2 through now, through year 8, I have still very beef heavy in my diet, but I have included all of the rest of the animal food kingdom in there also. I eat a lot of eggs. I eat fish when I'm hungry for it, and pork and other seafood and poultry once in a while when I'm hungry for it. I use a lot of animal fats of ghee and tallow and lard and duck fat to cook with. It is an amazing way to eat, especially after I spent 35 years of not eating any animal foods at all. My tracking, I don't track anymore, but in the onset and for a long time when I tracked, I didn't need to track carbs because I follow a carnivore diet and no dairy. I don't really need to track carbs. There's nothing to really track. But I do pay attention to my protein and my fat. And I need high protein. I needed high protein at the beginning in order to reverse hypothyroid and osteoporosis. Both of those, many people don't know that you need protein. Your bones are 50% protein, and the thyroid thrives on protein. So what I would do is, however much protein I need, I follow a 2-to-1 ratio of fat to protein. So if I eat 100 grams of protein a day, my target is going to be 200 grams of fat. And vice versa, if I go up higher in order to gain weight, more energy, more calories, more muscle building, if I go up to 200 grams of protein, my target is going to be 400 grams of fat for that day. So I always keep that ratio even, whether I am in maintenance or whether I am actively muscle building through weight training. I practice intermittent fasting every day, and I feel amazing in a fasted state. I have joy and energy in spades. My family calls me the Energizer Bunny. So I get the best of both worlds every day. I fast for 20 hours each day, and then I eat 2 very large meals within about a 4-hour window. So that is what works for me the best. And of course, I didn't start that way. I started with 16 and 8, you know, a fast for 12 hours or 16 hours. Fasting should be good for you. It should feel good. It should not feel like a burden. It shouldn't feel like you're watching the clock to say, oh my gosh, this is horrible. When can I eat? If you're experiencing that, then you need more healing to occur first before you try fasting again, because fasting should be an addition to your life. It should add a thriving component to your life and not make you feel terrible. So that is what I do for my meals. I eat 2 meals in a 4-hour window and fast the rest of the day. In terms of staying in ketosis, back in 2017, there weren't a lot of products or information available in order to do that. So I never had that available to me, and my healing 8 years ago and not slipping back into any sort of mental illness symptoms, I never felt the need to go back and purchase a monitor and check my ketones. So I have no idea what my levels are. I advocate that for others. It is, I think, a phenomenal tool that is available now to help you have the best, most thriving experience on a ketogenic diet that you possibly can. It's just in my situation, it wasn't available, and I ended up really not needing it. So I am able to tell how I'm feeling by fasting and heavy exercise, power walking, weighted vests, swimming, weightlifting. That puts me into ketosis and running on ketones, and then you balance that out with breaking the fast and feasting. I just stay in a state where I feel amazing all the time. Sleep is so restorative. It is so important. If you can't get a great night's sleep, that sets you up for a terrible next day. And if it happens multiple days in a row, multiple weeks, multiple months, you're just never going to feel the way that you could feel if you're getting restorative sleep. So what I pay attention to is at the very least, I try to get daily sun exposure. It's difficult in Ohio sometimes. I get as much sun exposure as I possibly can, April, May through October, in order to restore my vitamin D levels to optimal from coming out of the dark winter. In the dark times, I have a red light that I use for low-level laser red light therapy that keeps my vitamin D levels and my hormone production up where it should be, even in the winter. I practice grounding. I get outside. I walk barefoot in our 3 acres of pasture, spending time out there. It's also restorative for sleep if you move. The more physical activity you can have during the day, you will actually be physically tired at night. So I make sure that I get out and I power walk and I weight lift. Something every day. It may not be a full workout. It may not be a long time, but something physical that raises your heart rate and gets your endorphins and your hormones will allow you to get to a nighttime and have restorative sleep. I make sure our bedroom is a good cool temperature, not too many covers. I make sure I have blackout curtains so there is no light in the bedroom. We don't have electronics on. Television is not on. Try to get the best environment you can for a good night's sleep. Movement is so important, and exercise is important, and I am thankful today at being healed. I used to use exercise as a punishment for myself. I was addicted to hours and hours of cardio that raised my cortisol levels and my stress levels and tanked my adrenals. Today, being set free from all of that, I am able to use exercise to add to my life. So I enjoy a weighted vest power walking. Making walking a strength training activity is good for your bones to either treat or prevent osteoporosis. I have strength training equipment at home that I use. I have a Gold's Gym small equipment that I use for weightlifting and dumbbells and kettlebells. And I also use swimming. I enjoy swimming, and I do that as much as I possibly can. The avoidance category is somewhat different for me. I don't need to avoid any sort of drugs or alcohol or smoking or social situations that were toxic to me. What are on my list of avoids comes from what I've learned in the last 10 or 15 years about all of the different things that we come in contact with in our environment. I avoid toxins as much as possible. I'm not dogmatic about it. If I'm on vacation and we're at Starbucks, am I going to get a cup of coffee that's heated in a plastic-lined endocrine disrupting cup? Yes, I'm on vacation. But when I'm at home, I try my hardest to avoid, certain toxins, chemicals, plastics, the endocrine disruptors that happen during plug-in, and air fresheners. I avoid tap water and fluoride, and I avoid aluminum products in antiperspirants and cookware and Teflon. I do all of those things. I think it comes from the place of being diagnosed with heavy metals that I really had to take a look at what I was drinking, eating, putting in my body, what I was cooking with, what I was putting on my skin. One of the things that I was high in that were toxic levels that has had to do with my skincare. So I now use only tallow lotion for my skin, tallow soap. I have been able to get away from the carcinogens that are in sunscreens and that are in the products that you just normally buy off the shelf that have 50 or 100 ingredients that you can't even pronounce. So my avoidance has to do with complementing my nutrition with trying to stay away from toxins that are going to pull me down. Rebuilding your life after you've come out of mental illness is so very important, whether it be rebuilding yourself, your self-confidence, rebuilding the world around you, rebuilding your community, surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals that are on a journey to healing or are already healed. So rebuilding is important. And I rebuild myself with meditation and prayer and music. God is very, very important part of my life. And for so many years, I felt blocked to feeling his presence in my life. The mental illnesses were like a brick wall in my spiritual life. And when I healed at the 12-month mark, I can only explain that I had this spiritual awakening along with the nutritional awakening. And I just experienced a level of spiritual closeness to God that I've never experienced before. So that keeps me rebuilt within myself. And then I have spent a lot of time on social media building a safe place for others to contact me. That's so important to me, to have a structure and a framework in place, because we have 1 billion people in the world that are suffering from a mental health issue. 20 million of those suffer from schizophrenia. 1 out of 5 of anorexics perish. They have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. So it is so important that whoever hears my story, whether it be through a news article, through a podcast interview, they have to be able to feel that I am a safe place to fall. They have to be able to feel that they can contact me and they can share with me the most intimate details of what they're going through and not face judgment. So that is also part of my external rebuilding, is establishing a way and a place for others to contact me and to work with me to get them to a better place of mental health. In terms of tracking my progress, monitoring my illnesses, monitoring my mental health state, my physical health state, in 2017, I kept a very, very extensive notebook where I wrote everything down, how I was feeling every day, what I ate that day, if I had doubled my protein and my fat intake, and how I felt physically and mentally, if I had any alleviation of symptoms. That's what I did for that first year. And then in the second and subsequent years, I have not been as adamant about writing everything down anymore. I do track once in a while to make sure that I am getting everything that I need in terms of nutrition, in terms of protein and fat, and I plug all of my food into the app Chronometer, and so that I can look at my micronutrients and my minerals, and I can make sure that I am continuing to thrive nutritionally to match how I feel physically. And now, doing that, I developed protocols in order to heal osteoporosis and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease, and I was able to reverse hypothyroid and those oxalate illnesses that I spoke about before. I suffered from interstitial cystitis and vulvodynia and ringing in the ears, tinnitus. All of those I was able to reverse by tracking my symptoms and tracking my food and tweaking my nutrition and my minerals in order to chelate out the oxalic acid crystals that were in those specific organs that were causing illness.